You're listening to Rookie Pirate Radio, the official anime and manga podcast for InBetweenDrafts.com. I'm John Negroni.
And I'm Travis Hymas.
And today we're doing a manga recap of One Piece Chapter 1113, titled Stalemate. And Travis, there's nothing stale about us being mates.
Aw, that's so sweet of you.
I know, right? As usual, we're going to be discussing spoilers for the One Piece manga up until this point. So, if you have a sinking feeling that you haven't read Chapter 1113 quite yet, be sure to do so now for free on the Viz website or the Shonen Jump app, linked in the show notes as always. And remember, all new One Piece chapters are available to read for free up to 3 weeks after their official release, or whenever you want if you are subscribed to Shonen Jump, which we are and do recommend. Now, Travis, I love the internet, and I wish there was a way to use an app to talk to. You're right. It's who cares? Like we got stuff to get to.
I was gonna say you sound so non-committal. I will say
what's
about
Discord?
What's Discord? I will say about our little bits. I feel a kindred spirit with Vegapunk in just deciding to buy time so that everybody who's listening to the podcast can quickly go read the chapter and everything, because they definitely didn't do it before putting on this episode on purpose. And
Good
then,
point.
We can't just invent new coffee or anything like that. We got to do something. So, I think it's fun. I think we're in good company, but Discord is a real thing. And I feel like our producer is going to shoot me if I drag this out any further.
Yeah, it is, our invention is the One Piece spoilers channel on the In Between Drafts Discord. That is our invention. It's probably going to wake you up just as much as Vegapunk coffee. But yeah, that's your destination if you want to hang out with Travis and myself, talk One Piece with us, see what we're sharing in terms of theories and such, some stuff that we'll even be sharing here on this very old pod. And in addition to that, we do have an email. Yes, email exists. You know the deal. RookiePirateRadio@gmail.com. I'll say it again because I know Travis loves it when I say it 3 times. RookiePirateRadio@gmail.com. Okay, Travis, one more time. You don't have to beg. RookiePirateRadio@gmail.com. Tell your parents. And
music
with that,
to my ears.
Music to my ears as well, just in terms of speeding things along, because there's so much to cover here. And I can't wait, because we're going to kick off Chapter 1113 here with an interesting reader request, a color spread reader request. We don't get these super often, but it's super fun. It's The Straw Hats as Chess Pieces with Robin as the player by Man Who Loves Yamato. Very fun. Not too much to say about it, except that it's nice that it kind of ties into the name of the chapter, which is Stalemate, because it kind of, like checkmate a little bit. I don't know. Maybe I'm reading into that, but
No, you're spot on, and also this color spread absolutely whips. Nothing really to say about it, but we stan Robin as the secret tactician of the Straw Hats, and it's beautiful. Yeah. We can move on.
Her holding up Gear 5th Luffy and the king is a fighting piece is great. And that note, I couldn't help but notice that Gear 5th Luffy has like a little bit of what looks like a Toriyama looking sword strapped around him. Like something straight out of OG Dragon Ball. Maybe that's just me.
Yeah, anyway. Like a Goku-esque pose. Maybe he's got it on the mind still.
There you go. Okay. It's great. Frame it, add it to the list of color spreads we can't get enough of. All right, and it is Golden Week in One Piece, and with that, with One Piece in Japan. It's not just One Piece. What am I doing? All right, kicking things off. The last chapter ended with Itsumade, or Mars, I should say, coming up to the Den Den Mushi, about to interrupt the broadcast. And he was distracted a second by something, and Travis and I, and many others, this was a very popular theory, correctly predicted that we'd be seeing a brain in a tank, just based on that one sound effect. And we were right, except it's not just a brain, it literally is Vegapunk's entire head, including his hair. And makes sense, because it's like the top part of the head where the apple was taken. So that tracks. So Mars is about to crush the Den Den Mushi after coming across the Vegapunk brain drain. And just as he's about to do it, we kind of take a tour of several locations specific and connected to the Straw Hats. We see Syrup Village. We see a couple of the villages from the time skip. The basic idea here is that the message is about to happen and everyone's kind of like reacting in real time to the broadcast. And people are kind of like commenting on like, oh, like Vegapunk's home island where Frankie trained, for example. It's like, it's been decades since I saw Vegapunk, that sort of thing. We go to Chopper's Island where he trained the Birdie Kingdom with the really smart cavemen people. We go to Pirate Island, full of lead, which is cool. And I kind of glossed over Syrup Village, but it was cool seeing, Dr. Kaya looking pretty like, like she has been like, washing her hair. She's been, she's like dressed up fancy, hanging out with the kids, Syrup Village is doing all right, it looks like. And anyway. And then we also get to the point where Mars steps on the Den Den Mushi to stop the broadcast, but of course it's a decoy, as we predicted as well. Of course, isn't at the end. He transforms back into Itsumade. Doesn't even have time to like just destroy Vegapunk's like brain. He just leaves to try to figure out what to do next. And then Vegapunk's like, let's get this party started. Okay, let's get this message started. And everyone's kind of like, oh no, what's going to happen? Like, we go to some more locations as well, just to give, I guess it's like setting the expectations. Like, this is the world. Like, their plan has worked. 10 minutes has allowed all of these places to be like, oh yeah, let's get going. This is happening. So that has been clearly communicated. And it's looking like the Gorsei are not going to be able to stop the transmission, at least not before something gets communicated. Now, they do make this comment about York claiming that Vegapunk carried on O'Hara's research. So we get some like pointed reminders of them being like, oh, is Vegapunk trying to avenge what happened to O'Hara? It's like, literally the Gorsei are kind of being like Rookie Pirate Radio a little bit. Like they're trying to theorize and rather than just wait. They're all just trying to come up with like, maybe he's going to say this, maybe he's going to say that. And, maybe the Gorsei have an email too that they'll say 3 times. But so as this is the message about to strike, we do check in. We don't see any Luffy in this chapter, but we do check in with Sanji, who is carrying Vegapunk, and he says he can hear the sound of Bonnie's voice begging for his help. So this is clearly Sanji's observation haki. And Nusjuro is about to attack Bonnie because, as it was established in the last chapter, he cannot allow Bonnie to live because she has this incredible power over the Kuma, like pacifistas. And Sanji tells Frankie to move it, and the only one who gets to score points with Bonnie is me. We'll talk about it. And yes, that is if you can see the To Catch a Predator guy, he's right over there. He's kind of peeking in, and Travis and I let him in earlier. But so Sanji lands a severe kick on Nusjuro, but then Nusjuro transforms and bites Sanji. In retaliation, Bonnie does the distorted future and goes to giant-like future, kind of like the giant Luffy thing, and attacks Nusjuro as well to try to help Sanji. And then we get the revelation from Vegapunk, not revelation for us, but to the world, that the reason they're seeing this broadcast is because his heart has stopped beating. So then we get the reactions from a lot of people who are like, what? Vegapunk is already dead? So that is freaking people out like crazy. We see Duval, for example, who's like, but the Straw Hats, we're supposed to we're holding him hostage. What happened there? We're at Sabari Archipelago. We also check in with Caesar Clown, with Vince Smoke Judge and the Neomads crew being like, wait, we were supposed to knock Vegapunk down a peg, take him off his ivory throne. He can't just die. So they're not concerned for Vegapunk. They're concerned for their own selfish reasons. Big News Morgan has a weird reaction here. He was like, you can't just give away the story to the entire world. How am I going to sell my papers? I'm like, relax, Big News Morgan. Everyone's going to want to read the paper after this. Like, coexist, brother. And then Vegapunk has this kind of like, Vegapunk is such a both sideser. He's such a centrist. I'm starting to get annoyed with the guy. I can't say that what they're doing is evil. I will not apply the labels of good and evil at all. Like, shut up, Vegapunk. Shut up.
We'll talk about that too. We'll
get out of here. Yeah. Vegapunk is such a fence sitter. Anyway, sorry. I'm losing. The Vegapunk stocks are collapsing for me right now. But anyway. Then Saturn is not wasting any time. Saturn has spotted Robin and wants to do away with her immediately. He's kind of like, at this point, he's just like, all right, I've embarrassed myself enough. I need to get something out of this entire ordeal. Robin, to her credit, actually recognizes Saturn's voice from that traumatic event in O'Hara, which makes sense, trauma. And she realizes that he's one of the 5 elders come to execute her. And this is, of course, the coward trio, but they're not the coward trio when it comes to protecting Robin. They're a lot like the rookie pirates of this podcast. We'll spring in action if we need to. But yeah, Nami, Chopper, and Usopp immediately go full ham. And Brooke, sorry, I can't leave out Brooke. They go full ham to block all of Saturn's attacks in order to save her life. It's a beautiful thing. Even Zeus gets in on the action, especially. And then Vegapunk is saying this stuff of like, what I'm about to tell you is so preposterous you might even burst into laughter, which is interesting considering that's the reaction that Goldie Roger had when he made it to Laugh Tale, but we'll get to that. Itsumade can't seem to find the right transponder still. There's too many in the lab. York is trying to figure out what to do because York is, for her, like becoming a celestial dragon is on the line. So to me, it's a little bit of a hint that they might be able to stop the broadcast before the entire message gets out, but we'll see. But then Vegapunk says, however, you all have the right to know. And he's about to get into it. Itsumade, Saturn, Mercury, they're all kind of being like, what's going to happen? What should we do? Do they destroy the power plant? They know that they can't. They're stuck. It's a stalemate. I guess that's the point. And then Vegapunk says, to make a long story short, the world as we know it will sink into the sea. We see some Marines react in utter horror. They are mimicking the One Piece community. And then, of course, we get a prolific shot of a bunch of mermaids and fish at the bottom of the ocean being like, yes, join us. Break next week because it is Golden Week in Japan. And when I tell you, Travis, when I finished this chapter, the amount of self-control I was forced to employ, because literally I read this hours after our conversation about 1112, and how good did we call it? We literally mentioned the sea levels, we mentioned Wano, we mentioned like all this stuff about like how the world could be flooded. And I would just like to get, that's my hand on your shoulder, like pat on your back, and I can feel, that feels nice.
That's it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Camaraderie. We did it. We can't be wrong all the time.
When I was saying we were kindred spirits to Vegapunk, I meant, of course, in his intelligence level and how we just nailed that. We just got that spot on. Holy crap. What a reveal, though. What a way to start that.
I think my message to you, because I had to give you something, I was like, Travis, there was a before 1113 and there is an after 1113. But like, you see, fair, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
this changes everything.
This is the first piece of concrete information we have gotten in a long time, probably since the Odin flashback.
Yeah.
As to what
3
is
years ago?
really going on. Yeah.
4 years ago.
And in the case of the Odin flashback, of course, there was so much to dissect. Here, we've only got this one piece of information, but it's so
This one piece,
and it's so juicy and so. I mean, I guess I'll just dive right in. I am not convinced that the way this is presented is good or bad. This can go either way, and I think that is a fascinating situation to be in. With a break week coming up, because now we get to really ponder what does that actually mean?
Well, it can mean a lot of things. One of the first things my mind went to, of course, was the destruction of the Red Line, one of the longest running One Piece theories, especially when there was the revelation that Luffy was going to destroy the Fishman Island as a prophecy, right? And that if Luffy destroyed the Red Line, that would destroy Fishman Island, right? But now that's kind of being turned on its head, because the whole setup for like the One Piece final saga, for a lot of people assuming, myself very much included, was that really for the world government, it's been a preserve the status quo, right? It's been about like everything just needs to be stable. The pirates are the agitators, the instigators, the ones coming in to wreck everything and trying to make a better world. But what we're really seeing is an actual Noah's Ark situation, where it's pretty convincing at this point that what happened during the Void Century seemed to have been some kind of worldwide flood because of Noah's Ark, literally the Noah, because of Wano having to like raise the walls and everything and having an underwater thing impel down and those implications. And finally just the fact that the ancient weapons we've already seen raise the sea levels when you use them. That is established with Lulusia, right?
Well,
So
and we know that we got at the very beginning of this arc, in plain text, as plain as day, the world of One Piece is a post-apocalyptic world.
And they said it's time for another apocalypse, because I think it's Nesjuro who said, like, who's calling for another great cleansing, right?
Right.
That was however long ago. But that seems to kind of coincide a little bit with the idea of, like, the all blue, bringing the whole world together, not having any barriers. So, like, what do we do with that?
Like I said, is this good? Is Vegapunk saying the world is going to fall into the sea, and it's good because, because of whatever prophecy is kind of secretly behind the One Piece treasure? Or is it bad because he's figured out what they're using this weapon for?
Yeah.
That is a big question. And that's where I would like to take us back to Mr. Vegapunk fence sitter. That really seemed to
before you do, I want to complete that chain, though, because
okay,
the red line thing, that to me feels like the final war. It's the rest of the world finding a way to save all of the islands by finding a way, like with iceberg, like making them float, whether it's the artificial clouds, which Vegapunk working on artificial clouds makes a lot more sense now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it has something to do with Joy Boy, the idea of finding a way to make things float, make the islands float. What floats? Rubber, whatever. But the war then becomes, if they destroy the red line, then that is the big threat to the world government, because, if the world sinks into the sea, they're fine. Like Mary Jo and all that stuff is fine, right? And that is what could be the impetus for basically the destruction of the red line, and that being what ultimately destroys Fishman Island, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting that of all of the cutaways that we've done since this little broadcast has begun, the one place we have not done, and I checked with our Discord, so if we end up being wrong, blame them. But Fishman Island, and full disclosure, a friend pointed this out to me, Fishman Island doesn't appear. We don't get a cut to Shirahoshi listening in, or to Neptune or anything. We don't know if they're even getting the signal, which is very telling that of all of the places in the Grand Line and the greater One Piece world that we've checked in on, that one place is completely untouched. That's curious. The other one, Mary Joa. We haven't seen the reaction from the Celestial Dragons. Are they getting this broadcast? I would assume yes, right?
Yeah.
If it is supposed to go to the whole world. So,
and we still could,
to
right?
your point,
it could be like the next chapter has that. And
now would be the time, right?
Yeah. And especially with Fishman Island, like, we know that, like, transponder snails can work there. Luffy was in Fishman Island when he talked to Big Mom. So they can get a signal. I don't think that we have to worry about that necessarily.
Yeah. Leaving them out is on purpose. That's for sure.
Yeah. So, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that's going to be the thing that brings us into the next chapter. I know there's so many implications here. There's so many little details, but what about stuff in the chapter proper? What do you want to pinpoint here? Because there's a lot. There's the Sanji stuff.
Yeah. Well, let Chris Hansen sit in the corner for a minute. We'll get to that. But
yeah.
I do want to talk about Vegapunk, because Vegapunk does do all of the setting up to get to the big reveal. You got tilted about it, which is fun for me because I've been back and forth on Vegapunk this entire arc, kind of in the same way, where he's very morally gray in that, like, oh, I'm trying to help the world, but you're also kind of the guy who made all these weapons and everything.
Yeah, he's morally gray as his hair.
And he specifically says that he's committed 2 sins. He doesn't say what those are. Are those sins towards the world government, or are they towards the world? Those are really the only 2 options I can think of, because using the word sin is very specific here, and I do think that that's the intentional correct usage on the Viz translation part, because it's very similar to other translations. And also, he mentions that it's for that reason he'll die. And he says that whole wiffle waffle of, like, I don't know if they're evil, I don't know enough to understand him, Oda's favorite, kind of information by obfuscation kind of tactic. It's important that it's left vague like this, because I don't think whoever the person Vegapunk is referring to is going to get revealed, at least to the world, so that Luffy has the necessary plausible deniability going forward. There's already people, Duval specifically, saying, hey, was it the first thing we heard that the Straw Hats had him? What's up with that? Now he's dead. That doesn't look good. But you have Vegapunk specifically saying, hey, don't pass judgment specifically on whoever took my life. So I don't think Vegapunk planned it this way, but I do think it's going to turn out that that's going to give... It'll probably buff Luffy's bounty number, and the world government will try to frame it as he did it. But I do think that it will grant some necessary plausible deniability going forward that will be necessary to win people over in the future.
Well, I like that setup of like the world hating Luffy. That's a fun place to go, right? Because it gives us a nice little... Of course, he has to go to the Giants Island. No one else will take him.
Right. He has to go to places who either know him or know of his power at this point would be kind of... And that would be similar to what we suggested before, where like the Straw Hats find themselves on the back foot.
It pushes the Grand Fleet into... Yeah, the Grand Fleet now has to defend Luffy's honor, and it kind of pushes them in a compelling way to be like, no, he's going to be king. Which brings... Oh, man, I have an interesting thought on the whole king thing now. In Luffy's dream. Because like the idea of like a whole world being drowned like in the ocean and stuff, and like, you know, what does it mean to be king of the pirates? And I've been wondering like if the idea of becoming king of the pirates is more sort of like Luffy wants to be like the last pirate and make it so a world doesn't even need pirates anymore and no one has to be one, or like everyone basically is one by default, and him becoming king of the pirates and like achieving everything a pirate could, so no one else, you know, has to not live in freedom. I don't know, like there's something about how that ties into like the changing of the world that I'm trying to work my way through, Travis. So TBD, I'm trying to figure out what Oda might have in mind there, because he's drawing so much from the Noah's Ark stuff, and I feel like that's so intentional. Like there's some piece there with like the Noah, the Vikings, so like the Bible, Norse mythology, and how does the pirate stuff kind of work its way into that? And where does the pirate stuff kind of end for itself too, you know? So a little thought starter.
Of course, Luffy sees being a pirate as something different than a lot of other people do. Luffy's ideology is so baked into what a pirate even is, a very specific type of one, that it would stand to some kind of reason that plays into whatever his dream ultimately is. And even he thinks that his dream is relatively unachievable unless he has, you know, unless he becomes the king of the pirates, which to him, he said it before, is the freest man in the sea. It looks like it's going to be a very big sea here very soon. So make of that what you will.
Yeah, because then you essentially have, could it be one of those things where like the whole world is a calm belt? You know, and the Sea Kings just start wreaking havoc everywhere. And that, of course, creates like a very dangerous world. But is that really... Because, I mean, I feel like that so easily gets into the all blue thing. So I just wonder if there has to be more to it. Sanji's dream is everybody else's nightmare, apparently.
Well, this is based on... I will say that this is basically Vegapunk getting up on camera and doing his best Whitebeard impression and screaming that the all blue is real, right? Like, even if it doesn't exist now, which I think we've all kind of come to the consensus that it doesn't, it would have to be created in some way. I think we've all agreed there. It existed once. It existed at some point. Vegapunk being the one to talk about the world sinking into the sea and everything in the context of Void Century research, I think really locks that in. We'd all kind of figured that out, but having that just about confirmation is really good. And I do like that it ties Sanji's dream into, you know, Luffy's history, or his powers history, really, and the larger setup in general. His dream is basically a Void Century dream, too. So is Robin's. Nami wants to make a map of the world. Well, the world is going to need another map after everything happens, if it is, in fact, supposed to happen this way. You know, Frankie's dream, like, all of a sudden, all of these Straw Hat dreams start to make more sense. Except Zoro, I guess, but he has to be the strong one. That makes perfect sense in a world that's going to be all sea, right? Like, it doesn't have to all click, but a lot of them are starting to click into place now, which is very interesting.
Yeah. A couple of different ways this can play out with Vegapunk's brain. We might get to the point where I still think that they're going to push it so that his message doesn't finish, that the broadcast will end with a cliffhanger. And I have a feeling it'll be that detail he says that will make people laugh. And that would be Oda kind of teasing, like, hey, there's more to this puzzle. It's a thing that kind of ties in the laugh tail. But of course, the message is going to end, the broadcast is going to end, because that's not going to be how everybody figures it out or finds it out. And I think that at a certain point, the Gorosei will probably destroy his brain and kill him for good, and we'll get like maybe some kind of final goodbye. You know what I mean? But yeah, I don't know, because we see the brain in this, but it's not like the brain is communicating. I wonder if like the heartbeat ends, if there's brain activity, how that's going to play out. And I wonder if that's going to be how York kind of finishes things off, or they do stop the message and then they kill Vegapunk. They think they've won, and then what? Yeah, they take over Punk Records, and that wouldn't be it for Punk Records. They'll probably have to move it somewhere else.
Well, and we have Mars kind of pontificating about death and existence, which has been a recurring theme in the arc, but it's also one of the core themes of One Piece. It's something that we visited a lot of times. And I think it's very interesting that we have a character here who we have kind of accepted has probably lived for a very long time, talking about what death actually means. Where do our ideas go? Which is really interesting, since they're kind of set up as these primary antagonists to our main characters. And those characters already have the answer to that question. It's when your ideas are forgotten. It's when you don't have a will to pass on. Where do they reside? They reside in the people we leave behind. In Vegapunk's case, it very well could be all of these people hearing his message. Will Vegapunk ever die as a result of this? That's a little bit more esoteric than just like, here's his brain and everything. But I do think that it's very specific choice of words. And I do think that it sets up that ideology of the Gorosei versus the D clan, I guess is what we're still calling them, and how that works. The D's are not afraid of death. They'll continue living on through inherited will. Emu's group, potentially immortal, doesn't take damage, regenerates. They generally seem to be kind of pitiful in certain cases. It's kind of obvious dichotomy, but it's nice to see it really start to play out and come into focus.
Yeah, the Gorosei, they definitely in this chapter, I feel like we're starting to see a few more kind of like cracks in the armor a little bit. It looks like Sanji's kick is pretty brutal, and the counterattack definitely seems to have stopped Sanji, but of course, it's Sanji, so I think with the combination of his, extreme Germa like resistance and how fast everything's moving, I think that they can make it out of this. I'm of course far more worried about the Coward trio, who are now the Chad trio, of course, trying to protect Robin, because up where they are, I just don't know. There are no heavyweights in their proximity, right? Like Edison left.
Zoro and Jinbei are en route to them right now.
So that's two, sure. I don't know what can they really do. I guess like Zoro's probably a little bit weakened at the moment. Jinbei's got some cola in the tank, I guess, but yeah, I don't know. To me, it's probably not going to be enough to stop Saturn. So I'm a little nervous about how they get out of this mess unless Lilith has some kind of plan. Or yeah.
You mentioned Edison. Edison left specifically to do something to ensure that the Sunny can get away, or at least has a chance to get away. That's probably what happens. But in any case, just seeing everybody step up and manage to like land a hit on Saturn, protect Robin successfully. None of them seem particularly injured. Like Chopper literally blocks with his own body and like resists the hit.
Yeah.
That's all fantastic. That is all. I think we mentioned like, hey, what's Usopp going to do? What's, what are they going to do? Perfect. This is exactly what I think we needed to see from them. This is a Yonko crew. Not even the weakling trio of this Yonko crew are just going to turn tail and run. They're going to do the right thing.
Yeah. And I do wonder if because Robin's had a little bit of time to rest up, not a ton of time, but, she could go all out too, in a way, to try to be like, to do something, but the extent of her injuries aren't super clear right now.
She can definitely have as many hands as Saturn does, that's for sure. And she clearly has a bone to pick.
Yeah. His bone in particular, breaking all of them. Okay. Then there was Sanji. Little baby Sanji. Okay, so there is a read of this where somebody could look at it and be like, all right, by score points, that can be read as like a romantic thing. I don't remember what the actual Japanese says, but it is pretty close to what he's saying in terms of like winning the affection of. You could read something innocent there of being like, because I still believe he knows that she's a kid. I think his observation hockey has made that clear. I think he figured it out like early on, especially like a lot of them did. Particularly when I think he saw her in the storm thing at the very beginning of the arc. And for me, it could, I'm hoping so much that like just Sanji sees her as like a little sister and is kind of being like, you know, like little Imoto, you know, like a little kid, like little sis, like, and it's just more sort of like, oh, I want her to look up to me. Like, please God, let that be what it is. Because Oda, you love to take your risks. You love to dance on charcoal, but we can't do it. I mean, I don't want to have to call up, you know, your Nami wife and make this personal because I can't.
Oh man, I think this is one of those things where Occam's razor is punchline, right? This is for the sake of a punchline later. Some sort of thing where Sanji
like, you were a kid.
Yeah, that's... And I know there's like, oh, he had observation hockey. Oh, they saw she was a kid. We still don't know what happened between the not overnight. There's an entirely possible argument that Bonnie told everybody how her powers work. I feel like that's not the case, only because Nami would be acting very differently and probably not letting Bonnie just run off to begin with because of her own things about protecting children.
Did she, though?
Well, I don't think she did. That's what I'm saying.
I don't remember there.
Nami probably wouldn't let Bonnie out of her sight if she knew Bonnie was a child. That's kind of where I'm like, I don't think that she has actively said that to anybody. So that does bring up the question, can they tell? And in the case of this particular panel, where I'm going to sit is this is a taste thing. In Western culture, particularly American culture, I think that there is, for reasons we're not going to get into on this podcast, a sort of hypervigilance about children. And that hypervigilance often translates into things that see anything that may be problematic or even not problematic, but just extrapolated into it and project our own kind of culture onto it. Sanji has not done anything that is a crime, that would be in the pages of Rurouni Kenshin, that suggests to me that we need to check his search history or anything like that. This is Sanji in character acting out as he would for just about any other character. He doesn't immediately turn around and get heart eyes and start hitting on her like he would many other characters. I think that some of that's due to his growth over the course of Whole Cake to Wano to now. But let's be honest, if it was going to be something that obvious, that's how it would play out. Sanji has been completely normal. We've talked about this before. Sanji, up to this point, has been completely normal around Bonnie. There's no reason to believe that that's going to change. It's more of, like you said, it's in his character. He has always defended women. If we put Ali on this show right now, she would absolutely have his back as just the world's greatest feminist, that kind of thing. And again, if I had to guess, it's for a punchline later. And let's be real, the culture that Oda is setting up that punchline for is just a little less precious about this. Bonnie is out here acting like an adult. It's kind of difficult to hold characters accountable for information that they may or may not have. We have to keep that in mind. I don't see Sanji doing anything where he's gonna like assault her, right? He would never do that in the first place. It's not in his character. So I don't think we need to actually call Chris Hansen out, sit him in the kitchen and ask him what he's doing. He's being Sanji. And I say all of that to say that kick goes so stinking hard. What an incredible attack. That's one of the best Sanji attacks of all time.
Yep.
And I do not want to discount that because Americans want to be super freaking weird about stuff. Not going to do it. That panel goes hard. He jumps in. He's like, nah, Frankie, I'm going to do the cool thing. You did a cool thing last week. I'm doing the cool thing this week. We're totally fine with that. I do think Sanji is at least taken out for a minute because even if he has durability, I mean, let's be honest, I don't think anybody else could have survived an attack like that except like Luffy and maybe Zoro. So like, Zoro, yeah, it had to be Sanji taking that hit. I don't think that would have gone well for Frankie, and it goes so hard. So what a cool thing. I am more worried about that group than the Coward Trio though, because Zoro and Jinbei are on their way.
Well, we have the Iron Giant down there.
Yeah, the Iron Giant. Don't even get me started on that.
Yeah, we have about 5 or 6 chapters before the giant does something else.
Oh, jeez. I'm so over it. I know we talked about it before, and I was like, I don't even care at this point. It'll get here when it gets here.
Yeah.
But what is the giant going to do at this point besides scare them? I mean...
Could be what Edison is going after.
That's true. I mean, Nosturo specifically is very fast as well. So Bonnie kind of like being huge and trying to take him on that way is not a terrible idea. But I feel like that matchup is just harder right now than the Saturn... Especially since we've seen Saturn take so many L's at this point that it's kind of funny more than it is threatening. So, like, honestly, yeah, let Robin just, like, grab every single one of his legs and play with him a little bit. Why not? It'll be fun. It's all good.
There are a lot of comments. Let's get into it. And
all right.
They should keep the discussion going, that's for sure. KSE04 says, I keep having this terrible feeling that the world government is going to attack the towns that see the broadcast and not hear it. Pretty sure the Mother Flame is the cause of what's to come, and as its recreator, Vegapunk feels compelled to warn the world. My guess is a transmission snail to stop the broadcast is on Kizaru, and he doesn't even realize it. Vegapunk switched his snail watch that is supposed to pick up wiretaps. That would be funny, but yeah, I don't think Vegapunk has any sneak points in his build. So to get one past Kizaru feels a little tough. I don't know about... I don't feel like the world government needs to be destroying islands for even seeing the broadcast, just because like seeing the broadcast and hearing the broadcast makes no difference. And so I think that if the world's going to sink anyway, like, yeah, I don't know. I think that they're going to be more likely to just put down rebellions with, the Mother Flame at this point.
I think I like the idea of some sort of enforcement. Not necessarily destroying islands, but increasing marine presences. Maybe this is what gets the Holy Knights actually moving in the public eye. That could be something. I think that's an interesting idea because at this point, we have a lot of islands in need of liberation or have been liberated by Luffy. But most islands just kind of exist within the government system. And that's not a good thing. We know that. But a lot of people just live their lives relatively okay. They're just kind of here. So if we are going to bring all of the islands into the story and we are going to raise the stakes, I think putting some pressure on them besides a nebulous idea of the world sinking is not a terrible idea at all.
Yeah. Takahanga said, climate change. I was not expecting that. I assume Luffy Joy Boy would reshape the world, create a Pangea or something, but how is their water level rising? The theory or idea about the red line being created in the Void Century is interesting. Yeah, so I have 2 things on this. First, I shared a theory in our Discord, the One Piece spoilers Discord, of course, and the In Between Drafts server, link in the show notes, that I thought was pretty interesting. Somebody shared on Reddit this idea that the name of the ancient kingdom is Impelled Down. And based on what we know of Impelled Down, it kind of looks like a huge castle. And so the idea is that the ancient kingdom had this like big castle, and that's the only thing sticking out at this point, and there was this whole other huge island. I think that's really interesting. But either way, they also had this thing about Impelled Dawn. Okay. But There's also this theory I remember reading kind of recently about how the world could like drain like a bathtub, and that would be like silly enough for like for Luffy to like change the world by literally draining it and being like, we don't need any pirates anymore. We don't have any more oceans. Dream accomplished. I'm the king of the pirates because I ended piracy. I was the last great pirate. I think that's kind of fun.
Yeah, that is.
I'm
fun.
adding my own bit to that.
I like the idea. People have floated this before that we've seen Laugh Tale, that it's already been revealed to us, because that would be just mind-boggling to see happen. My personal Ancient Kingdom theory, and this is similar to some of these, and I feel has more weight, even though I've felt this before this past chapter. I think it's a ship. I think it can move. It's like an island. It's like Iceberg's Island, right? It can float. It wasn't a central location or a singular island. The kingdom itself was some sort of like nation flotilla of sorts. That is, especially if it is a kingdom of pirates, that kind of makes more sense to me personally as something that you couldn't just lock down. But that's just me personally. I don't have a whole lot of new revelations about that. But the idea that the world might have been more water before kind of.
Well, we talked about like Iceberg wants to have like a floating island. That ties into, that ties into Tom. That ties into Goldie Roger too, right? And I like the idea of it moving around or being invisible or something like that. And like I saw some people throwing around the idea of like, what if the road poneglyphs and being able to reach Laugh Tale or even Lodestar to that effect has to do with the sea levels? You have to go at a certain time. There has to be a certain Aqua Laguna. Like Water 7 could have been our big precursor to explain all of that stuff. So you need like a Nami level navigator just to understand like how to reach an island like this. It really would speak right to the idea of like, it's not just the road poneglyphs that's required. It's like the full crew. You need a fishman, you need the right navigator, you need a musician, because of course it's going to be being sake related. I'm having fun with that a little bit, but you need the world's greatest swordsman, because you gotta, there's danger afoot. You need a cook because you're going to be at sea probably for a long time. So like all this stuff, you need a doctor because there's probably going to be some disease coming in their way. All of these little pieces are going to be necessary for the one piece. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and you need a jewelry bonnie to keep John happy.
That's right. Well, somebody's got to get the straw hat, and yeah.
You mentioned the road poneglyphs, and I hadn't considered that in context of recent events. The world changed after the Void Century. That seems to be what we're working with here with the expectation. How do they know that?
How do they?
The ancient kingdom, so to speak. So we actually don't really know for sure who carved on the poneglyphs, like by name, outside of technically, I guess, Joy Boy. But if the road poneglyphs are specific directions, and they do even do things like talk about like the naturally occurring things that you have to manipulate to get somewhere. If the conflict with the kingdom, the other kingdoms, resulted in the weapons being fired and the water levels rising and everything like that, wouldn't that have changed all of their calculations for navigation? Like radically, potentially?
Yeah, because we already know you can't navigate normally in the Grand Line in the New World.
Right. So
because the magnet, the poles.
That would suggest. Now, again, there was at least one member of that period of time who could travel through time, and it does seem like some sort of future sight is happening just in Odin's journal, for example, that he's like, in this amount of time, certain people are to show up, that kind of stuff. But that is interesting. I hadn't really thought about that way before. Just if they are in fact navigation coordinates or instructions or something, those instructions have to still be accurate somehow.
Right. And how could they? Yeah, that's a very interesting point. Very interesting. And I feel like it has to do with something involving Emu, of course, our resident sea devil, for all we know. And yeah, there's so many layers to this. I mean, you get into the devil fruits too. I know we talked about the idea of like whoever had the pawpaw fruit during the Ancient Kingdom days, could have been the one who warped the poneglyphs. That seems to be, I think, one of the more plausible explanations for how that went down. So this is from Mega Matthew 75, who said, honestly, I bet Vegapunk trolled and put the transmission transponder snail on a sky island. Probably gives way more range too, like a satellite. Also, I'm thinking that everyone is going to panic for the red line. Either A, red line's the only safe place to go to avoid the rising sea, and everyone gets angry realizing only the celestial dragons were intended to survive and revolt against the world government. A+ prediction there. B, I believe that the only real way to survive is by getting everyone onto the massive ships we've seen in the story that were from the Void Century. Noah from Fishman Island and the ancient weapon Pluton. Judging by the fact we saw Fishman Island at the end of the panel, that's a guess. That's an assumption. It's not necessarily Fishman Island, but could be. Shirahoshi is definitely going to be key here. Why? Well, since Noah was meant to be pulled by sea kings, it makes sense for Shirahoshi, or Poseidon, is to be the one to head that ship and bring millions to safety. Pluton is also just chilling in Wano, even though it was instructed to open the borders, probably to free the ship. But what's stopping the world-saving plan from working? Luffy. He got Noah destroyed, and his influence on Wano being Joy Boy and all might have been why Momo didn't open it up. The time's going to come soon, and they're out of options for saving the population, so the problem has to get tackled head-on. Whoever or whatever might be causing it. I see that as an opportunity for Enel to come back into play with the moon and all. Also, if that big party theory is true, then Luffy will have this big party if either all islands are connected or everyone's in the same place because of the displacement. But hey, that's just a theory. Also, Oda low-key cooked on this cover art. You seeing this? I think Mega Matthew 75's cooking over here. Now, I'm not liking all these flavors, but the dish as a whole is Sanji level for sure. I really want to pinpoint, like, especially like the Momo thing. Like Momo having an idea that this was going to happen would make so much sense for why he decided to wait in terms of opening up the borders, because he probably realized that, like, oh yeah, if I have to wait for the right time, and the right time is almost here.
Yeah, that's really interesting too. We haven't really talked about the fact that Momo knows a lot more than he let on. We've talked before about how, like, eventually somebody has to sit down and explain to Luffy at least some of the things going on so he knows what he needs to do next, or can decide what he needs to do next. And it really feels like we're just getting close to that time where somebody just really does have to have that chat with him. Is it going to be Bonnie? It might be Bonnie. I mean, at this point, it could be Prince Loki for all we know, if we actually do make it to Elbaf.
Yeah, on that note too, that the whole thing about the Red Line being under siege and by a revolutionary revolt, perfect. That's another, like, big cohort we're probably going to see in the next chapter soon enough, which is the Revolutionary Army, because, like, this is obviously going to be horrifying to them, but they can use this, opportunity to really, like, kick up this war an extra notch, honestly. So that's a for sure A+ prediction there. That's going to be a huge thing.
That's a great catch, because it's the exact kind of propaganda they want to have.
Tung Creed said, "Nope, that was Frankie. He's a ship now. I guess everyone in the verse actually thinks that he's a ship. He's going to give Sanji a run for his money as the unknown crew member." Yeah, I mean, it's a fun joke. I do wonder if we're ever going to get a real payoff to, like, why that happened, but I just think it's funny that people who spend 2 years with Frankie are like, he's a ship now. That makes sense. Like, yep, there you go. What else do we have here? Oh yeah, Chimera Cord also said, "Yikes, now the whole world's going to run for the Red Line. I'm also remembering the large bridges the Celestial Dragons want built. But if they know the islands are going to sink, where are they supposed to connect to?" So my thing is, the Celestial Dragons don't know this. And this is definitely something that only the Gorosei and Emu knew. I don't think Akainu knows that this is going to happen. Which Travis, Akainu gets name dropped here. And he's called Soft. So the growing, unrest among the Marines. You and I have talked about this a lot, of like a Marine civil war. And I keep more and more thinking that, like, Akainu is going to be like the frickin', flag waver for some kind of faction here, because when he finds out about this, how is he going to react? How is he going to react when the world government is like, let them burn, let them drown? That kind of gets into Game of Thrones territory a little bit. Some of the backstory for A Song of Ice and Fire, where, you have this, like, pretty evil character and like Tywin Lannister and Jaime Lannister, and for those who are aware of the books, but being forced to, like, do something drastic and disloyal because like they do have a line when it comes to justice and their own honor and all that stuff. So am I making too much of it? Do you think Akainu is going to be like, good, we could use a great cleansing? I don't know.
I mean, it depends on the framing of this, right? Is this actually we're going to destroy every island? Is this we're going to crush the rebellion? We're going to finally crush pirates? I mean, it's propaganda, right? There's an entire likelihood that they could easily sell this to a believer like Akainu pretty well. He's never been curious before. He was there on Ohara where Vegapunk saw, an opportunity to learn something, because if power has this much to hide, there must be a reason. Vegapunk saw the value in that. Dragon saw the value of that. The giants of Elbaf saw the value in that. Akainu saw the ability to do horrific things. And I think that that's more important to keep in mind. Again, I think a lot of people like the Admiral Cope because we've had them as characters for so long. And we've had so many different like villain types come through, change in some way or another. Whereas the admirals, with the exception of Kuzan, we haven't really seen that happen with. And it would be nice to see their character arcs. Well, we've seen time and time and again, we have Kizaru here already having his feet put to the fire, metaphorically and literally, about his justice, about his beliefs, about his relationships. And he chose the incorrect or, the immoral path every single time. That's your Admiral character arc. These guys, they're not inherently good like a bunch of other characters. Now, I could see Akainu eventually reaching a point of no return where, like, this is my line, you can't cross it. I do not think we are anywhere near that.
Yeah.
He is more than happy to do executions. He is more than happy to tamp down revolutions. I still like the idea that he has a personal relationship with Dragon that might be causing some of this friction. That would be interesting to explore if we get there, if that turns out to be the case. I really like that idea personally. But at the end of the day, the reason Kuzan did not want to be a Marine once he took power was the fear of how oppressive Akainu wanted to be with that power. Knowing that, fundamentally, that's who he is as a person, knowing that they have things like the Pacifista and the Seraphim now, I don't think Akainu is that sympathetic of a person. I don't think he has that much consideration for empathy. I think that puts him, if anything, at odds with other Marines who would absolutely be on the other side of this. And not just the Sword members either. I think there are admirals who will see this information and immediately react. Fujitora is that admiral. I think Green Bull 100% is going to be the crazy one that is the full sellout the whole way through. I think Akainu won't go that far because he is at least a bit more rational in his logic, but I mean, he has consistently proven himself to be one of the most violent people in the entire series. I don't know why that would stop now. There's just no... It's Cope. It's just Cope.
Makes you wonder, like, I can't wait to see everybody's reactions. Blackbeard, we know he has some sort of big master plan. Kuzan, honestly, there are definitely a lot of things I want to know about. Like, Kizaru at this point, I think he's just so, like, he's so down deep, honestly. Like, he's so, like, he's in too deep at this point. But I do want to add that I think that it's fun to kind of toss in also how the admirals all have like elemental abilities. And, there's something kind of interesting of that, like all tying into like person at the top is like the sea devil. And then you have like from there, you have the light person, gravity, magma, and ice. And like, it's interesting that they reserve, it's a character who can like create into, forests, like all of these, the people who could kind of protect the world in actual like helpful ways in this scenario are kind of in a tank for either the world government or a dictator pirate. So there's something interesting to that.
That could terraform after the fact too, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. So, there could be something interesting there, but the fact that we're held back by that fact a little bit. And more, I keep thinking of like the yokai. There's the sea devil, but our protagonist is the sun god, and I want more. I'm like, who's the moon god? Okay, so Vasarto said, "What if all the islands exist because of rising ocean tides? The world could have been a world of continents and the growing seas as a result of something that Emu is a part of. Too many questions, too many possibilities." And yeah, I think that's like the pretty like common reasoning at this point. I mean, in Pangea Castle, it's like literally named, like Pangea. There's so much evidence. There's been a lot of evidence that, the sea levels were lower, that, there are these underwater places, and the ancient kingdom, I saw so many people being like, the ancient kingdom was Fishman Island, maybe, there's a lot of stuff pointing in that direction. We already mentioned Impel Down and all that. So I think that's super valid. Hero to Anime said the Sky Islands could have been an ancient method of escaping the growing ocean waters. Makes you think if Emu is an avatar representing the Mother Ocean. And of course, Sanji uses his love power to actually damage one of the 5 elders. As for Vegapunk's real head, I wonder if he reached awakening status to be able to remove his brain like that. That's interesting. Did he awaken? I don't know if that's an awakened ability though, because maybe because you're kind of making something else your brain, you're interacting with your environment to do something. Maybe maybe Law did it.
We talked about it last week too. Like, is Vegapunk's power contained in his brain, or is it his body entirely? If that
is that the Rocky Port incident?
Yeah,
is it Law doing the surgery with his brain? Because kind of recently, right? Sorry.
Yeah, right. And then, the brain is in a liquid, right? So that liquid has to be one that doesn't sap his devil fruit power, right? So it can't be, it has to be something he'd created. But Vegapunk literally has kind of become the master of devil fruits, right? He's figured out how to literally transfuse it. Yeah, it's probably green blood, right?
Yeah.
That seems pretty logical. So I think he's figured out a way to really extend the influence of his devil fruit in a way that nobody else really could, because they just literally do not have the scale of understanding of how devil fruits work, much less his own, to make this happen. But again, therein begs the question. It seems like his brain is still transmitting signals. The satellites are still working. This is all technically accomplishable because of his devil fruit power, right? So what happens when his body does actually die and his devil fruit reincarnates? Does that still work or not? It's kind of up in the air, because devil fruits are kind of whatever Oda wants them to be, right? Like Boa Hancock, when her devil fruit was about to get stolen, she said, if you do that, I can't, you won't be able to undo what I've done. Maybe she was bluffing, but maybe she wasn't. We don't know.
Yeah, I kind of wonder if, because this was Oda started this back in the late 90s. I wonder if he watched Titanic, and that's kind of what inspired him to be thinking of like, what if the entire world was the Titanic? It's sinking, and the story becomes a struggle for who's going to live, right? And so you have the folks on the Red Line, and the lifeboats are literal islands. And they come out and say, we have these artificial sky clouds or whatever. We can save your island, but you have to pledge your fealty to us. And, only islands that are part of the world government will be saved. But then you have like a rebellion, you have a revolt of like, no. Like, we have these other islands that are unaffiliated. We don't need your kings, and we want to survive too. That would be really cool. And because especially if Luffy is the one who could basically solve that conflict. Luffy could be the one who saves the entire world, not because he's a hero, but because he's Luffy. He's the king of the pirates. And, some kind of like thrilling war for like the Red Line or something like that. Who knows? But like something that could have like Luffy swooping in with his big pirate coat and his permanent white hair, and, Travis and I as the cabin boys as part of the crew.
Stars in our eyes.
Exactly.
Just enthralled. That is a good point, though, that whatever happens does have to be like, we have to motivate Luffy. It has to motivate Luffy, and he is surprisingly simple, but also,
yeah, the islands sink, they won't be able to eat.
Yeah, like that's what it's going to take, right? Is somebody going to have to be like, well, Luffy, there's not going to be food, But like, he doesn't just get involved. He's not gonna like step up, like, oh, all of this stuff's gonna happen. His reaction to this is not, I'm gonna go to the Red Line and punch every celestial dragon in the face. It has to be more personal. It has to be something that can grab his, ADHD riddled mind, So that is an interesting idea that we eventually do have to motivate the Straw Hats specifically. This does have to eventually tie directly into the chase for the One Piece, right? So, we kind of see how that goes together, but they don't yet. So it'll be very interesting to see how that happens.
Yeah. This is kind of interesting, actually. Snickersnack said, my guess is that's why the 20 Kings moved to the top of the red line to escape this outcome. Maybe the 20 King Alliance and that one ancient kingdom had opposing methodologies or beliefs to approach the crisis, but Vegapunk didn't want to side which is good or evil. It's just that the 20 King Alliance came out on top. And by that, Snickersnack is being literal. There is something interesting about this of like Nefertari Lily stands out, right? Alabasta is like the one, that still, the kingdom that, is more independent or whatever, but still part of the world government. But yeah, there is something interesting. I know people were commenting on like, oh, the stuff the Celestial Dragons are wearing are like diving suits. So yeah, more and more, it seems so clear that the world was not just some big ocean during the Void Century. It seems to have been a more normal world like ours, probably. And literally the islands are the tops of mountains, basically. And if there was some kind of ancient weapon that could effectively like drain the world or find a way to like separate the islands from that ancient, whatever, and so the islands could float or the islands could survive this somehow, that would be very interesting. Very believable.
Yeah. I'm trying to like visualize how the weapons play into this, because this idea that this was like a crisis kind of brings the weapons into like a sharp relief, where I'm really wondering if weapon is the correct term. Like, what if this was, if they're weapons at all? You know what I mean? Like the ancient weapons. What if it really is like just a naturally occurring crisis that originally prompted this? And as a result, because the society was already technologically advanced, they already had devil fruits hypothetically, then they could have created these Vegapunk style for the purposes of solving these issues. The Pluton was much like the Noah, supposed to be an arc. The one that we assume Emu has, if it's Uranus, literally drain the planet, like you said. They're tools in the hands of certain people, but because of the end result being what it ended up being, they're now weapons. That would be a really solid tie back to Vegapunk specifically and Egghead in that larger, kind of, oh, these are the sins that I've committed. It's turning on these weapons because I thought they were tools.
BRNDNDSS says, that totally makes sense why York would want to be a celestial dragon now. Seems like she does know the Void Century after all. How else would she know the world's going to flood? And on top, Mary Jo is the safest place to be. I don't think York's that smart. Like, I don't know. Like, York does know, to be fair. I think that does track in terms of like York being aware that Vegapunk has been researching this, has figured this out. So sure. Yes. I believe I'm with BRND and DSS on that. Adams K0 said, I love the cover with Robin happily playing chess, and it's amusing that Saturn is calling Akainu soft. Probably the only nice thing that guy has done was not kill Aokiji after their duel. I still think they had a plan where Aokiji infiltrates Blackbeard's crew as a mole, given how he wanted Smoker to get word to him. And he didn't seem to follow up on trying to kill Kobe, and probably hasn't gotten in the way of his promotions, though the Rocky Port incident made the papers, so it would have been hard to stop him. I think it's kind of the latter. Yeah, I think that Akainu just kind of was like, all right, I'm the pencil pusher now. But yeah, some interesting marine dynamics there, but I don't see Aokiji joining Blackbeard's crew as a mole. It seems a little bit too, I don't know.
If you're Akainu, why would you kill one of your best assets?
Well, he's not an asset if he leaves the...
Well, yeah, if he leaves, but in that moment, yeah, if you're Akainu and you're in that moment...
He might have been commanded not to kill him.
Yeah,
it's like, we can't afford the devil fruit falling into the wrong hands or something. Yeah.
I mean, that's a good point, actually. At least with Kuzan, he's a known quantity, right?
Yeah. Lionblade has something interesting here. I had a feeling that Mars was seeing Vegapunk's brain, but I wasn't expecting that it was going to resemble a light bulb. Although, considering that light bulbs are symbolic to ideas, as in people having ideas, it is rather fitting that Vegapunk's brain would look like a light bulb with hair. Sanji came in at the perfect time to save Bonnie, as that gave the Giants and Bonnie the advantage to step in against Nesjuro. Speaking of Bonnie, it was great to see her taking her powers to a whole new level. It was also great to see Nami making the call to protect Robin from Saturn, and to see the other Straw Hats in that area doing everything they could against Saturn to protect Robin. As for Vegapunk's message, the One Piece fans through social media pointed out the hints and foreshadows that confirm Vegapunk's message, even at the beginning of the Egghead arc. There was a hint, foreshadow of the world sinking into the sea, in the form of what happened after the Lucia Kingdom was no more. And yeah, that is right, Lionblade, because Travis and I called it just last chat. But and I love that light bulb call out. I think that's very astute, and it might not even be intentional, but it definitely fits.
I don't think we talked about it much, but the scale of that head is nuts. Like, Mars literally can turn into a giant bird demon monster, but in the panel of the brain, his body isn't even rendered. It's so, like, the camera is so pulled out. The spread doesn't even do it justice.
Yeah. And I know that it is so clear that the world is going to hear this message and be like, that's believable, because they're already experiencing like entire coastlines disappearing. Islands have already begun sinking because of what happened with Lulusia. Like, yeah, it's speeding along. It's being fast tracked, if nothing else. It almost makes me wonder if it's less so about like, Goldie Roger was too early, right? Because maybe the sea levels had to be a little bit higher for whatever is going to happen. And he knew he wouldn't live to that point. And that ties into Momo has to wait as well. But then if the Mother Flame can speed that along even further, it could be that it's still not time. But the story could like move it that way, I guess.
Well, you could even argue that, again, if they do have future sight, if they did know back in the Ancient Kingdom when they were carving the poneglyphs and setting up the Laugh Tale, which I don't think is itself the Ancient Kingdom. Maybe it is, but, neither here nor there for this. If they knew that this was something that was going to happen, it's possible that they calculated that into things. So Momo would know that the time isn't right yet because they haven't started agitating that until after the events of Wano.
Yeah.
That's completely feasible.
Yeah. And, how is Zoe? How is Zunisha going to handle rising sea levels? Going to be tougher to walk and all that, I guess. But yeah, the minks will probably be okay. And on that note. But okay, Travis, we've gone through the comments. Was there anything else in the chapter that we didn't get into? I feel like we covered a lot. It's good.
I did want to cover one last little thing because I thought it was, I don't think it's like super critical, but I do think it's a fun little detail on Oda's part. And that's
Duval's new haircut.
Duval, of course, we love to see Duval. King, of course, but the Birdie Kingdom, we check in with the Birdie Kingdom and we get to see their take on Vegapunk. And just like you were kind of harsh on Vegapunk at the beginning of this episode, they're kind of harsh on him too. Like, which is great because one of the big surprises of Birdie Kingdom back right before the time skip was the reveal that they were actually pretty advanced as a culture themselves, but choose a simple life. And I had seen it implied online that basically Birdie Kingdom science went in a way that it avoided any kind of weapons manufacturing, regardless of the scientific benefit, and therefore they live a much more fulfilling life. Whereas Vegapunk, who really only wanted to do that, has created various tools of oppression and weapons, and potentially worse as this message goes on, as we learn. That's kind of a fun little jab there on Oda's part. I quite enjoyed that.
Yeah, good call. Yeah, we did kind of gloss through a little bit of like the tour, the grand tour. I mean, I didn't even mention Laboon. I often think about Laboon and like the idea of like the whales crashing into the red line. We've seen other whales kind of do that same thing, and that is, of course, fueled the long-running theory that the red line is artificial to some extent, because the whales used to be able to theoretically like be able to go like travel to different oceans, and that was kind of raised as some sort of barrier. I still believe that when the sea levels must have rose, and if we did have like a terraforming admiral class or whatever, the red line seems so artificial just because like the world looks artificial. It's so weird, like the way that the one continent kind of goes around, and it's created to like legit wall off this one place that they know that people can't go to for some very specific reason. And they've created a place that's a breeding ground for pirates, if nothing else, because you're just asking, when you create a treasure, you're asking for it to be found. Literally, you have Luffy who has an X marking the spot on his chest, who's like, I'm going to go find it. And it's like such a self-fulfilling prophecy. But yeah, great stuff. Great stuff. And I just one more time, I just want to say Kaya's looking good. She's taking her vitamins. She's been, doctor school's been helping her out. She's, going to bed on time. And she's, yeah. And then the salt and pepper kids are, of course, they can't get enough. What's going on with Dr. Vegapunk, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I love of course. Oh, yeah, the kids never change. It's fun.
Yes. They got a little bit bigger.
It's kind of wild that everybody's just listening into this Vegapunk message, just not knowing that their entire world is going to get turned upside down. It's wild.
Maybe literally. Yeah.
Maybe literally.
All right. Well, I think that this podcast will turn upside down. The sunset it shall end. But thank you so much for listening. We do have a break. I don't know if we're going to be back after the break, if it's going to be a 2 week or 1 week, probably 1 week. But until then, we'll try to figure out what we're going to do programming wise and go from there. I know, Travis, there's tons of new anime out there. There's Kaiju number 8. I assume you've been partaking. I've been watching some Mushoku Tensei season 2, the rest of the second core. And yeah, maybe we'll do an anime check-in or something like that. I'd love to hear from you on some specific stuff.
Yeah, we could do that.
All right. Well, thank you as always for listening to RookiePirateRadio@gmail.com. Don't forget to call Travis's entire family if you want to send us One Piece theories, fan speculation. I guess if you don't want to show up at Travis's doorstep, you could go to the Discord and do all that fun stuff there, or leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts or whatever, because that helps us out for some reason, and tell us you like us or not. And yeah, we'll see y'all later.